Thank you very much, Acting Deputy President. I too rise to speak on this bill, and first of all let me commend Senator Bragg for this bill. He's put a lot of thought, consideration and expertise into this bill, and he has certainly filled the gap, the yawning gap, that this Labor government has left. Now, this bill itself creates a licensing regime for digital assets with custody, disclosure and minimum capital requirements that will give consumers protection and the market certainty that it needs. And it is certainly a market that is crying out for certainty. And like so many other examples of this government, I've got no idea what they spent 9 years in opposition doing, because unless it was actually delivered with a nice little red bow from the trade union movement or some of the industry super funds, they have been completely unable to govern across so many ministries because they have just not done the work and certainly do not understand the portfolios that they're now responsible for administering. And there is no better example than this, than a senator in this place who does have the expertise and the mastery to actually fill in the gaps where this government has failed. But unfortunately, as we heard here today from those opposite, just because it wasn't their idea and that their own minister, Minister Jones, was completely incapable of putting this bill together in the first 18 months of their government, halfway through their term, they have still left this yawning gap. And like so many other things, they've come into governments, and across so many portfolios there's review after review after review, which means inaction, inaction, inaction. And government means you have to make decisions. You have to understand what you're doing and you have to make decisions, because if you don't, you go backwards. And that is exactly the case now in this portfolio and in this industry. It was only 2 years ago that in an EY report, which clearly demonstrated that Australia was on track for a crypto boom by 2030, and the country's crypto industry could swell up by up to 30 times its current size. Well, that has come to a shuddering halt and is now going backwards because this government is incapable of working out how to regulate this industry so that it can grow and so that we can attract investment in this sector here in Australia. Now, so what are we talking about in this sector? So digital assets are a booming new asset class with thousands and thousands and thousands of unique economic opportunities that has the possibility to drive growth and create long-term jobs, particularly for the next generation of tech workers. Australia needs a robust, but to do that, to achieve that, it is not rocket science to realise— well, apparently it is rocket science to those opposite, but it is not rocket science to realise that Australia needs a robust regulatory framework to foster investment and ensure that customers are protected from fraudulent activity, which, like any other sector where there's money involved, there will be fraud if it is not well regulated and people are not protected. But after now halfway through their term, instead of working with the regulatory industry and regulate the industry to provide these opportunities for the burgeoning Australian financial sector, the Labor government is dragging their feet, putting the industry in limbo when they should be nimble, when they should be able to— they should have actually come in with a plan to do this. And in fact, had they just implemented what we had in track in 2022, this would now have been passed over 12 months ago, and we would now have a very different sector and far more opportunities, but again, they have just dragged their feet. And instead of innovation companies looking to Australia, they are now going elsewhere, where governments are promoting innovative products and also are providing the protections for those who are operating in this market. And worse, after just 18 months of this government, productivity is declining, real wages are declining, and the government is not doing anything that could stimulate the economy and providing well-paying jobs, especially for younger Australians in these emerging markets. So their pride and their incompetence is meaning that we are losing day by day opportunities in this sector to grow this sector, to regulate the sector, but to provide new career opportunities for tens of thousands of younger Australians. And as I've said, Labor what they have shown themselves to be incredibly good at is not making decisions, not leading, not governing, but conducting endless reviews, having catchy terms in media releases, but the substance of producing legislation that will improve the lives of Australians is absent. And the fact is they were not able to produce, after 18 months of this incompetent minister, not being able to do something as fundamentally as important as this. He had it all there, but no, I don't know what he was doing, just sitting there looking at it. Did he throw it in the bin? But now the Parliament is doing the job of the government by bringing forward this comprehensive and this outstanding piece of legislation from Senator Bragg. And Australia, when supported, and sometimes despite not being supported by those opposite, have been at the forefront of technical innovation. Not many Australians know, but Google Maps was actually created and invented here in Australia. The flight box recorder, cochlear implants and hundreds of other products. When you support innovation here in this nation, Australians thrive. And Wi-Fi, that's exactly right, Senator O'Sullivan. But instead of just taking where we left off in government, and now a private members bill, an outstanding private members bill, this government is giving a two-fingered salute to the tech industry here in Australia, saying we are too proud, we are too stubborn, and quite frankly, you are too incompetent to actually even just agree, swallow your pride and say this is a good bill and this should be carried. Australia needs innovation and not stagnation that this new government, not so new anymore, is providing us. But we do need robust safeguards to ensure that the Australian financial services industry remains not only the most efficient and the safest in the world, but that it will provide opportunities for the next generation of Australians. So let's have a look at a little bit more about the nature of this bill. So what is in this bill that those opposite are so afraid of saying, yes, this is the right thing for the Australian financial sector? So the bill itself is designed to regulate the digital asset gatekeepers, which are the exchange operators and asset holders, and also impose industry standards. And it does so by creating a single licensing structure with various authorisations. And licence holders will be subject to various obligations to be developed in consultation with industry and the community. Now, when you listen to those, they are such common sense regulatory requirements. They are good practice. They are world practice. But those opposite ditched the proposal that we were developing, and we would have actually been implemented 12 months ago now had we retained government, but we didn't. Those opposite came in with Minister Jones, and what has he done? Absolutely nothing. And now we are bringing a bill forward, courtesy of Senator Bragg and the hard work the committee has done, to actually fill this gap. And even still, those opposite are so proud that they would rather squander the opportunities in this sector than say, yes, we will support this bill so that this sector can move on. So what else does this do? In relation to stablecoins, the bill will provide minimum reserve standards to ensure that stablecoin issuers hold in reserve the full amount of their face value liabilities on issue in accounts kept with an authorising deposit-taking institution here in Australia. Think about that. That is such an important protection for Australians in relation to stablecoins. It is good practice. It is world's best practice. But yet those opposite do not have a plan and are not supporting implementing these recommendations or this bill to protect Australian businesses and Australian individuals. Now, in respect to the central bank digital currencies, the bill will also require banks and financial institutions to make disclosures to ASIC and the Reserve Bank regarding their use and their management of foreign central bank digital currencies here in Australia. This approach follows that taken in the US, but in an expanded and a more effective way. But again, Labor are opposing this. Labor are opposing these protections, and it is a complete and utter disgrace. The bill also provides critical consumer protections that would have safeguarded consumers during recent notable exchange failures, and everybody in this chamber are aware of those, including FTX, ACX.io, MyCryptoWallet and Blockchain Global Limited. This bill is actually designed to protect Australians from such frauds and crimes. The bill empowers ASIC to monitor and enforce licensee requirements and provides the requisite civil and criminal penalties available to deter such misconduct against Australians. So, Mr Acting Deputy President, this is yet, sadly for Australians, yet another failure of those opposite. They didn't pursue the work that we had already well advanced in 2022. Minister Jones chucked it in the bin. But instead of actually implementing or just rebadging it as their own, he's done nothing for 18 months. Nothing. And here you've got, care of Senator Bragg, an outstanding bill which would get this sector going. It would provide the protections Australian individuals and companies need to operate safely and profitably. And it would also be the signal, if passed, for foreign capital, which is now going elsewhere to other markets in this sector, to come here to Australia and to have the confidence to invest. By not implementing this legislation of their own or this private senator's bill, those opposite are knowingly and deliberately, possibly just incompetently, making Australia a sovereign risk, not only for foreign capital, but you are not making it easy and you are not making it possible for Australians to engage in this new economy safely and securely. And the shame is for Australians. I don't think anybody could have imagined the damage those opposite have managed to wreak on the economy. We heard yesterday that through their incompetence they've let out over 80 people out of detention.
It being 12 minutes past 10.